Great. Well, great to see everybody. Thank you so much for making it out at lunchtime for what I think is going to be a terrific discussion. How many people in the audience, is this your first Canadian Club event? Can I see a show of hands? So quite a few. That's exciting. That's great. Thank you so much for coming out. We'd love to chat on the way out and hear about what made you decide to come out today. We're really trying to open up the club and make more events accessible to more people and have it grow the audience. So thank you so much for being part of that. My name is Andrew Graham. I'm president of the Canadian Club of Toronto for this year, and I'm your host today. A big welcome to our webcast viewers. If you're wondering who's watching on TV, we webcast our events. So if you want to go back and see this after today, you can do that. You can also watch it live via webcast. Our club wishes to acknowledge that we're meeting on the traditional lands of many Indigenous peoples over the centuries, most recently the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation, on whose territory we're meeting today. We're grateful for the opportunity to meet on this land. At the Canadian Club, we really focus on bringing decision makers, leaders from politics and from business, and also thought leaders. And I think the two people we have in front of you today are a great example of that. Really excited for the conversation that we're going to have. Before I introduce them both formally, though, I'd like to invite Daniel Dale to come forward to assist with a credit card, a business card draw. If you want to put your credit card in, we'll take that too. And we are giving away a bottle of wine courtesy of the Foreign Affairs Winery, which is a great winery here in Ontario. And the winner is Craig Middaugh. I hope I'm saying that right. Yeah. Congratulations, Craig. And now our speaker. Daniel Dale really works at the epicenter of American politics in Washington, D.C. as bureau chief for the Toronto Star. His days and nights are often long and drama-filled, and that's because of one man, the President of the United States. Daniel keeps himself very busy by being, I think he's really made a name for himself as a very thoughtful commentator, but also someone who's very adept at focusing on untruths, statements that are less than fully truthful coming from the current president in the United States. And as we all know, that's certainly a job that takes a lot of time and dedication to stay on top of all of that. He's been on CNN, MSNBC. He's a regular tweeter, and he has a following of about 500,000 people on Twitter, which is a lot of people for Twitter. So that's all very exciting. Before his move to Washington, Daniel covered Toronto City Hall and Mayor Rob Ford. He's a Thornhill native and a multi-award-winning journalist. He's joined in conversation with Valerie Pringle. She is one of Canada's best-known and most respected television broadcasters and volunteers. She's a member of the Order of Canada, and she has been widely acknowledged for her contributions to communications and volunteerism. Daniel and Valerie, I'm pleased to pass the Canadian Club of Toronto's podium over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for the kind introduction. Welcome, everyone, particularly people who've never come to a Canadian Club event. It's fabulous. Usually it's not bring your own food, but maybe that's a win. It depends. Anyway, I should also say I'm a proud Ryerson grad, so I'm happy to be here in home territory. Anyway, Daniel, so nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, too.
We've never done before,
No.
but I'm an admirer.
Thank you.
And have watched what you've been doing in the last number of years with interest, you know, keeping track of Trump's lies. Talk about a job for life. How did you develop this niche? How did you take it beyond everybody at first going like, what's he saying and, you know, what's the reality, to being pretty much the only person who has consistently parsed every single statement he's made for its factual base?
So it was very accidental. It was late in the 2016 campaign, and it was September, 2 months before the election. And I just grew frustrated one day that Trump was lying so much, and this was not being treated as an important story at all. And what was happening was reporters would sometimes fact-check him on Twitter during his speeches. They'd be like, that's not true, that's not true. But then if you were to go read their story in the next day's paper or online or watch, you know, whatever network, it just wasn't being talked about. The story would be like, Trump gives Clinton new mean nickname, you know, Trump unveils immigration plan, whatever. And all that stuff is important. But I thought, you know, the fact that one candidate in this race was saying literally sometimes 30, 40 things in a day that weren't true was a story in itself. So I thought I'd try to bring attention to this by just tweeting an informal list on Twitter And it got a huge response. Like I had way fewer followers back then, but these were getting thousands of retweets. So clearly there was a demand among at least some part of the American electorate. And then what happened, I think it was like 3 or 4 days into it, Michael Moore, the filmmaker, tweeted something like, every day on Twitter, this Canadian journalist makes a list of Donald Trump's lies, shames the US media. And that got like 10,000 retweets, and I got thousands of new followers. And I thought, like, truly, I was like, oh my God, I have to do it every day now because Michael Moore said so. And so it just grew from there.
Are you the only person who is doing this on a absolutely consistent basis?
So the Washington Post also keeps a running list. So I was the first one to do it. They started later, but during his presidency, both me and the Post have done so.
How much of your day does it take?
It takes
and
a lot.
Night.
It's a
and
lot.
Weekends.
Right. So it's a lot of nights because I'm not a full-time fact checker. So the Post has 3 full-time fact checkers that do this. I'm supposed to be the Washington correspondent, so writing about the big news of the day, writing interesting, thoughtful features, helping Canadians understand what's going on. I do a lot of trade stories, so NAFTA negotiations, and so the challenge for me has been doing my actual job and then doing this thing that I sort of fell into also. And so in practice, that's meant a lot of weekends and nights. It started as a Sunday night initiative, and I could do that for the first year or so because he was averaging 2.9 false claims per day in 2017. And so that's like, say, 20, 21 a week. So I could do that in a few hours on a Sunday. But then in his second year, it went up to over 8 per day. And during the midterm period, I think in the month leading up to the midterm, it was something like 30 per day. And so when it gets like that requires more of the weekend, it requires nights, it requires some of my days. So it's been an increasing burden on my life.
Well, and obviously so many interesting things to explore about this and the why of it. One of the things, I mean, I certainly early on, shouldn't say this, I worked as a journalist for many years, but I just tuned out. I couldn't stand it. I couldn't stand it on any American broadcast media because it was so hysterical and it was so hard to listen to the president and what he was saying. So, I mean, is that what happened, even though the media is being paid to follow him and to cover him? Why did people tune out so much? Why weren't people holding him to account? What is that?
It's a really good question. I think it's a mix of things. One, I think reporters are inclined to do what they've always done. And so reporters, for the most part, were trying to apply the old coverage models to this very new kind of candidate. And so, if a candidate gives a speech, a traditional candidate, usually you say, you lead with the new policy announcement or some outrageous, a gaffe or an outrageous remark. And you usually wouldn't say in a news story, like, by the way, the candidate also said 3 things that may not be true. And that makes more sense to me when it's only 3 and they may or may not be true. But when it's like 30 and they aren't true, that coverage model doesn't work. And so I think it took American reporters a while to figure out, like, hey, if we don't point these things out in our stories or in some other medium, we're not accurately or adequately communicating what has happened in this campaign or in this speech. I think some of it is also pressure from higher up in the food chain. So people yell at reporters. Like if you go on Twitter, you have people yelling at reporters, like, why didn't you point out the lies? Or even, why did you call them falsehoods or false claims and not lies? And often, I've talked to reporters and they would like to do not exactly what I do and not keep a comprehensive list, but more of what I do. But at their paper or at their TV station, the publisher or the CEO or whatever says, that's not objective journalism. And so my sort of mini, I try to just be a reporter, but I've launched this sort of mini crusade on Twitter mostly to convince my colleagues and others in the media that pointing out that someone has lied is not a departure from objective journalism. Like that is objective journalism. Pointing out that something isn't true or saying there were 10 things that aren't true in the speech, or including a quote and then after the quote saying, by the way, that's wrong because that is objective factual journalism. And so I think for a bunch of reasons...
Has this become muddied? He's managed with fake news and claims and allegations and to confuse the whole subject, truly?
He does. I think he does muddy the waters, and he also increases the perceived risk of people who might want to challenge him in this way, because especially for American outlets who depend to more than I do on access to him, they want to get interviews, they want to get scoops. If they know that, if they challenge him face to face in an interview, or they write an article about all the lying he's doing, he might see that and he might tweet about them, and they don't like that, and they know that their company shareholders don't like that. So I don't think it's all that cynical. I think a lot of it is just that reporters just keep doing what they're doing. But I think Trump and the way he attacks the media does make it harder for some people to challenge him.
Well, and you've been the recipient of a fair bit of vitriol.
Yeah.
Personal. I mean,
Yeah.
people who, is it mostly on Twitter they take you to task and want you to leave him alone, or?
It's Twitter and email. I have regular emailers, and I like to tweet the hate mail. Some of my favorite tweets are just screenshots of the things that people send me. Some of it is awful. Like, some of it is racist, homophobic, anti-Semitic. Some of it is just sort of enraged, and some of it is good faith criticism. Like, I understand, he makes things up, but look, you're Canadian, why don't you do this for Trudeau, or for Scheer, or for Doug Ford, or why didn't you do this for Obama or Clinton? And so I have responses for all those things. So it's a mix of vitriol and actual questions.
Mm-hmm. Well, in some ways, that person is right. I mean, we know politicians have weasel words or don't always speak the truth. And, you listen to things that they say and think, well, you could fact check, they're not quite true. Or, the last phrase that came into mind was, Trudeau talking about the erosion of trust, which he used again and again and again, which was just sort of a phrase. I mean, we're so used to politicians framing things and saying things in a certain way that, we have become sort of cynical.
I think so. And to people who say, why don't you get people to do this for Trudeau, Scheer, Ford? Like, I think this could be done for every politician. The list isn't going to be as long, but the fact checking as they speak, the fact checking in your stories, compiling a comprehensive list. I think it can and should be done for everyone. And what I tell people, like, I get a lot of Trump supporters being like, oh, politicians lie, the Clintons lie, Obama, like, of course they did. I think that what makes Trump different is the quantity. We've never, talked to any presidential historian, you've never seen like 30 per day in a campaign period, or this many during the presidency. And then also the triviality, the needlessness of so many of them.
Okay, so let's get to this, because I mean, you must have thought about the why and the wherefore, the psychology of this, and is it just, someone who came up from New York real estate and they just tile, it's 20 billion stories and I've raised, a gazillion dollar. I mean, that was his world. So, we've got a trade surplus, Canada's got a surplus, or, he'll just say things. That's just the style.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just like how his brain works at this point. So as a developer, he was adding stories and square feet and features and whatever. And then, as like this Playboy celebrity, he was calling up the New York tabloids and making things up to them. And then he became a candidate and kept doing it. And there's, he hasn't faced consequences. He's the president. He's very wealthy. His wealth is inflated, but he's very wealthy. And so, like, why would he stop? And so people have a lot of different theories about, like, why he lies. Like, some people have argued it's a demonstration of his power, when he looks someone in the eye and he tells them something that isn't true and they don't challenge him. It's another way of asserting his dominance. He's obsessed with this idea of dominance. Win. You are the alpha. But I think a lot of it is just like, this is who he is. And some of them, it's like, it's just habitual. Like, some of the most striking ones to me are when he takes actual accomplishments and then just makes it bigger. So, like, we have I haven't checked this month because I've been off, but as of last month, it was the lowest U.S. unemployment rate since 2000, so like 18 plus years. And it'll be like, it'll say that in a speech, and it'll be like, the lowest unemployment rate in more than 18 years, even though it just says 18 years. He always adds a more than. Or he'll be like, the lowest unemployment rate in 51 years, which has no basis whatsoever. And so he just, like, the truth, even when it's good for him, is never good enough.
Is it strategic? Is he smart like a fox?
So I think some of it is strategic. Like, if you can convince people it's the lowest unemployment rate in 51 years, that sounds better for you. They
The
think
biggest
they think
crowd ever at
biggest
an
crowd.
inauguration in the
Right.
history of the world.
Yeah, so the crowd size lies, like those are some of the funniest to me, and some of the funniest to fact check. So like, he'll make claims not only about the crowd in the room, but the crowd outside. He's always like, we have like 10,000 people in here, but outside we have 45,000. And that's hard to fact check because I'm often not there, and the reporters are in the arena. So I'll put out a tweet like, is anyone outside? Sometimes, one rally, Jenna Johnson, a Washington Post reporter, was outside watching with like 200 people. As Trump said, there's like 20,000 people outside. And she reported like all the people here like laughing. Sometimes I've contacted, like, he had a rally in Springfield, Missouri, where he claimed there were 45,000 people outside. So I contacted the city of Springfield, and the information director was like, there was 1,000 people outside. And so lies like that, I think, are less strategic than about his ego and insecurity. He always has to, even if it's a small crowd, he has to convince himself and others that it was big.
When it comes to, again, I'm thinking of NAFTA dealing with other countries. And I have conversations, with friends in America, and they'll say, well, we've got, Canada's raping us on this. And we've got, and I go, no, the numbers that, I've seen and I'm reading aren't like that. People take it as true.
A lot of people do. And yeah, it's a large percentage. I like to remind people, though, that, I think every poll that I've seen that asks, do you think Donald Trump is honest and trustworthy? It's somewhere in the 30s that say yes, and somewhere in the 50s, often in the 60s, even as high as 2/3 that say no. And so I think we have this kind of anthropological fixation on, Trump country and Trump's voters in the way that a lot of Torontonians did when I was at City Hall with Ford Nation. It's like, even in your own city, people were like, who are these people? Why are they the way they are? And you get that a lot with Trump, like, why are these people believing everything he says? And I think that's interesting, and that's something I've explored. But I think we also have to remember, like, for a significant majority of the population, his lies are not working. And so either people don't like him because of the lies, or they know he's lying and they vote for him for other, sometimes very rational reasons, like he cut my taxes, he put pro-life justices on the bench. And so my argument is that I don't think the fact that he still has a base means that everyone is believing him.
Last week even was 43%.
Yeah, it's significant.
So you have to believe from that. Now, right, they can either say cut my taxes, healthcare, like he did something.
Yeah.
The economy's better,
Right.
He tells it like it is. That's that phrase you hear all the time, and you're thinking, no, we don't. He doesn't see things as they are. He sees things as he is.
Yeah, I've thought about that phrase a lot because that was a common refrain with the Fords also, right? Even after it was proven, he'd been lying for months and months about a video that he said didn't exist, and it existed, and so on and so forth. And I think a lot of it is the appearance of authenticity through manner rather than substance. And so I think what we found with Ford and with Trump is that if you can seem like you're unpolished, people can confuse unpolishedness with honesty. And so if you just seem like you're talking, you seem truthful, even if you're just rambling about untrue things.
But we've seen, here and there, an audience for that, an appetite for that, an electorate.
Yeah.
To whom that really appeals.
Yeah, and it's a mix of factors. So one of the most interesting stories for myself was when I went to 2 counties in Ohio, and I tried to talk to Trump voters about Trump's dishonesty. And I was kind of tired of the cliched Trump country story where like the reporter goes to like Betsy's diner and talks to the regulars and like do you still like Trump? They're like, yes, we still like Trump. But I had specific questions for them, and so I was like, do you think that he is honest? If so, why? And if not, why do you still like him? Like, how does it affect your views on him? And I had a number, so this is a very unscientific sample, but I had a number of people tell me that they know that he's a big liar, but they like it because it messes with the brains of people like me. And so, the elites, bureaucrats, he's like, people being like, yeah, like he makes things up, and it has like all these people in Washington, running around like a chicken with their head cut off, trying to catch up to him and fact check him, and so it's this kind of like, blow it all up. People were like, one person literally said to me, like, these people, like they've made us suffer in this town, and now it's time for them to suffer. And so I like someone who's just kind of bothering them. And so like, I think that can't be underestimated. Trump, I think a large part of Trump's appeal is just that he makes the right people mad in the eyes of a lot of voters.
Mm-hmm. Well, and we saw that obviously with Brexit too, that when you said the word elite, that utter distrust of people, but there are facts and there are finite things and there are things we can measure and there are things that we know, and you go, yeah, well, that's just your opinion. I mean, even professors find that now. There is an attitude, but with a powerful, again, voter behind it, of we're sick of elites, experts. And you go, well, but they know what they're talking about. Well, who cares? That's just what you think.
Yes, you have a lot of that. And you have, it's actively fostered by much of the Republican establishment, but also I think Fox News is a major factor. And people like Tucker Carlson, who's like, a multimillionaire elite, used to wear a bow tie around. But he's convincing people, the elites are out to get you. And I think, like, to look at it from these people's perspectives, like, elites have let a lot of people down. Like, there was an Iraq war, there was a housing crash, there was a devastating recession. And so I think people have some good reasons to distrust,
There are weapons of mass destruction in Iraq.
Yeah, and so, when people say they don't trust the media, like, you have people on the left, too. It's not just Trump voters saying, I don't trust the mainstream media, they led us into war in Iraq. They helped elect Trump by just giving him all this airtime and not fact checking him. So I think there are good faith critiques as well as the nonsense.
Mm-hmm. What about the rest of the administration? Has it infected everybody? Sarah Sanders just has to repeat what was said or defend it, or?
Yeah, I think it has infected them on a wide scale. And you can argue, okay, Sarah Sanders is just a liar, Kellyanne Conway, they're just inclined to lie. But I think the fact is, if you had a boss, a president, who was like, this is embarrassing for us to be caught saying things that are not true, don't do that, they wouldn't do that. I think I don't have sympathy for Sarah Sanders. I think she's a big liar.
She does do that to keep her job. She has to.
Yeah,
like, she couldn't say, well, perhaps he misspoke. Or...
Right. So I don't have sympathy because you can quit. No one's forcing her to work there. I think she often goes above and beyond with the lying in a way that she doesn't. Even working for Trump, you don't have to. But yeah, like anyone, you cannot be a spokesperson for Trump without lying. And something they've tried to do, it was Spicer and then Sanders and others, they'll say the president believes that, because they don't want to put it in their own voice, because they know it. So they know, like, these people aren't like him. They know that he lies. He lies to them in private constantly. But it's, if you're going to work for him, you have to make things up.
But it seems that everybody gives it a big shrug. So for all your painstaking work, really, have you moved the dial at all for people looking at it and being horrified, who weren't already horrified? People who don't care, don't care.
I don't know if I've had any impact. I feel confident that I've had more impact doing this than if I was not doing it. Like, if I was just doing the usual job of a Canadian foreign correspondent, covering trade negotiations, writing interesting features from different towns. But the fact is, it's impossible to tell. What I say to people is that with any journalism, you don't know if you're making an impact, especially right away. With Woodward and Bernstein, they reported not the full story, but they had a bunch of great Watergate scoops before Richard Nixon won the biggest landslide in American history. He won 49 states after a lot of the story was out. And so you don't expect, to change the election. What I say is, as reporters, our job is to get facts to people, get good information to people, and to hold people in power to account as much as possible. And so that's what I'm trying to do. But yeah, am I persuading Trump voters? I have no idea.
No. Has the landscape changed irrevocably, or is this person, in his extreme false statement, making a one-off?
I think it's too soon to say, but I think it's especially too soon to say that like something has changed forever. And I go back to the Toronto example. Like we went from Ford to, you know, like an aggressively boring mayor, right? Like that's his brand. His brand is like, I'm pleasant, I'm boring, I'm not gonna bother you. And I think that's possible. We'll see that in Washington also. Like there's a hankering for normalcy among a lot of the electorate. And if you look at the Democratic primary, yeah, like there have been some false statements, but you haven't seen anyone being like, okay, this guy got elected, you know, telling 20 lies a day, so I'm going to tell 20 lies a day. And so I think it's very possible, maybe even likely, that if someone else became president, we'd revert to normal levels of political dishonesty.
So as you've kept track of these, I mean, you must have some faves.
Yeah, it's so hard to pick. I mean, we're at like 5,000 just from the presidency. I forget how many more from the campaign, but it's got to be 1,000.
5,000?
5,000, yeah. So I've been off for a little bit. It was like 4,913 when I stopped, and there's been dozens more since I've been off. Yeah, some of my favorites are like the most trivial, ridiculous, obvious ones. Like the one I bring up a lot is when he lied about the Boy Scouts of America. You know, he gave this ridiculous speech to the Boy Scouts where he was very political and aggressive, and he was criticized for it. And then someone asked him about that criticism, and he was like, no, actually the head of the Boy Scouts called me and said it was the greatest speech ever given to the Boy Scouts Jamboree. And so like I was going out for dinner that night, and I was like, that definitely did not happen. But a challenge in fact-checking Trump is that he's the president, and entities, especially corporate entities, big nonprofits, they don't want to contradict him because he can make their life difficult, even just by a tweet. Don't donate to the Boy Scouts, you know. But I emailed the Boy Scouts, and they emailed me back. Yeah, they emailed me back very quickly, being like, no one ever called him and said that. And so, so the president lying about the Boy Scouts, that's one of my faves. He did this interview with the Wall Street Journal, I think in late 2018, where he was bragging about his tariffs. You know, revive the steel industry was dead, now we're back. And then later in the interview, maybe like probably 5-10 minutes in real time, the Journal reporter asked him about criticism of the tariffs. Like people are saying you're hurting downstream businesses, you're whatever. And he's like, what tariffs? I don't have any tariffs. I've threatened tariffs, but I just use them as leverage. I didn't impose any. And so he goes from moment to moment, like just trying to win the moment without any regard for what he said in the past or what he has to say in the future. So those two are, I think, among my favorites.
Well, didn't he also, I remember you writing about one where he said his dad was born in Germany.
Right, and so that, and the thing that frustrates me is like, I think that it would be educational or at least interesting if he were asked directly about this. Like, sir, your father was born in the Bronx in New York City. Like, why do you keep saying he was born in Germany? But what happens is that people asked his Sanders and others, and then they don't answer, and then it's dropped. And then when the media encounters him, they ask the usual opinion kind of questions. So, what do you think of this latest thing? What do you think of what Joe Biden said? What do you think of the Kentucky Derby?
Yeah.
And so he's so rarely challenged directly about any of the dishonesty. And I think, and so someone asked me, like, do you think that would like change people's opinions? You know, if he was confronted about where his father was born? No, I don't think that's going to change the 2020 election. But I think it would teach us, his response would be interesting. It would be enlightening, in even in some little way. And it just.
You've never seen that moment on a broadcast interview or anything?
There have been a couple of moments. NBC's Peter Alexander has challenged him, I think, twice in the Rose Garden during press conferences. A Forbes magazine journalist challenged him once or twice in a sit-down interview. And what usually happens is that he just adopts a new statement without acknowledging that he had been wrong. And so I wish I could remember the example. Or I'll be like, oh, that's something that someone told me. That's something I heard. And so there's always these unnamed many people, these unnamed they, who are his authoritative source for all these remarks. So it's never him, it's someone else.
Wow. It is so astonishing, but it does seem, as you say, part of his psychology and his personality, all his life, so that this is not going to change, and it doesn't seem to impact his role as president or the support of his supporters?
Yeah, he's not changing at this point. I think one moment that might have forced him to be different is if he had an interview with Mueller, which he never submitted to because his lawyers knew that he would perjure himself. He wouldn't be able to help himself. But yeah, there have been very few moments where he's had to tell the truth. And even when he has been under oath, like in a deposition, in a lawsuit, he's been wildly dishonest. So no, there's no forum or no moment that I think will change him at this point.
So just going forward, you've got your work cut out for you. And
yeah, I mean, I'm not looking forward to the campaign because he has 2 and 3 rallies a day, and in those rallies, I think something interesting about the midterm period was that the lies started to be written into the speeches, whereas...
How is that possible?
Well,
like someone had to write those speeches, and I presume it's not him.
It's not him. So for the most part, what happens is that his speeches will be largely factual. Maybe you can take issue with the thematic focus, or you can say, well, the theme of this is that immigrants are dangerous, or illegal immigrants are dangerous. They're not that dangerous. But in terms of strict factual inaccuracy, they come when he is ad-libbing. It's not in his text. What we saw in the midterm period was dishonesty as a strategy. And so these were on the teleprompter.
So what is speechwriters and the people who were planning the strategy have baked into the pie that they can say anything to shore up any argument and foment, and it's just going to be felt to be part of same old, and people,
Right.
discount it.
Right, and we see that especially on immigration, and so the campaign strategy in the midterms was dishonesty to foment fear or hate, whatever you want to call it, about immigrants.
Yeah, that was because the big midterm story was the caravan.
Yeah, it was the caravan, and some of it was Trump, like George Soros is somehow behind the caravan, unknown Middle Easterners in the caravan. So some of it was from him. He at one point.
That's right, Middle Eastern terrorists were there.
Yeah.
And what was George Soros?
Right. And there was one moment I thought was interesting where he said, so he told a joke in one rally. He said, Democrats want to give illegal immigrants free health care, free education. Next thing you know, they'll give them a free car. And so people laughed. And then in the next day's rally, he said, did you hear it? Democrats want to give illegal immigrants free cars. and then I fact checked that, and people were like, no, he was joking. And I'm like, no, the previous one was a joke. This one wasn't a joke. And so you see him sometimes workshopping the dishonesty, and you see it kind of evolve over time. And there's the recurring trope of like the big, strong, crying man approaching him always backstage in a private setting, telling him, "Thank you, sir, for saving America." And it's always like a burly coal miner, a steel worker, a farmer. And so yeah, there are recurring tropes that if you watch him long enough, you recognize.
Wow.
Yeah, it's weird.
But I mean, after all that, I mean, it's more than, really, if you were on the side of saying this is a president, this is a head of state and a head of government, and this is conduct unbecoming. I mean, I don't know or are those just such old fuddy ideas that those people are laughed at and voted out?
Well, it's been interesting to see some Democrats make Trump's lying a part of their campaign. So you notice if you listen to Kamala Harris's speeches, she talks about truths a lot. Her theme is, we need to speak these truths. And I think some of it is independent of Trump, but I think a lot of it is in response to Trump. She's positioning herself as someone who will be more straightforward than he is. Bernie Sanders, I think, has been the candidate most aggressive in pointing out Trump's lying. So he will often tweet, the president is a pathological liar. Where I think for many, even Democrats, they don't see a gain for them in pointing out Trump's lying, because I think their calculation is like, everyone who sees the obvious is already on our side, and everyone who doesn't see it, I'm not going to convince. But there are some of them who have tried to make it part of their campaign. So I think there is a sense among at least some candidates that this is important to at least some voters.
We've got a microphone, so if any of you, in the few minutes we've got left, have any questions that you want to ask Dan. Oh, put up your hand. We got one here. I was just reading a biography of Robert Moses. Now, he wasn't a president or an elected politician. Fascinating, crazy man. But he lied all the time.
Yeah.
Lied all the time to get his projects done. Bald-faced, dead off. Like, I was just listening to this, thinking about this conversation we were going to have, and thinking, wow, where is the press? Why isn't someone checking? Here, the microphone, if you can. Oh, sorry, you've got a question, then we've got one up here.
Hi, thank you both. This has been really interesting. And Daniel, I think the work you're doing is really important.
Thank you.
My question is, has the president's attacks on the media and subsequently his supporters changed the way that you and your colleagues do your jobs as reporters? And even more to the point, has it led you to take steps to protect your safety?
So on the safety thing, I felt very safe, even though it's a real thing. We're not making up the safety concern. CNN had bombs sent to it. But I feel okay. And in my personal experience with Trump supporters, they've been very friendly. Like, if they don't want to talk, then they'll just be they'll walk off. But no one has even berated me, let alone threatened me. So I felt fine. In terms of changing how we do our jobs, I think yes, but some of it has been for the better. I think there's an effort to provide more transparency in how we do our work, like explaining how do we get this story, making clear what our sourcing was, because we know that we're under such heightened scrutiny. I think, I think also with fact checking, I think the fact that it has intensified, from people other than me, more people are doing it. I think some of that has been in response to Trump's attacks. Like, you are calling us fake news. We are going to respond by aggressively pointing out when you are being fake, because we know that we can't just get into a name-calling battle with him. What we can do is respond with factual information. And so, I think there has been an effect, but I think for the most part, the attitude has been like, let's do our jobs, but better. Let's do great investigative reporting. Let's expose things about this administration, and let's not let him and his attacks, throw us off our game.
Here, we've got someone.
I'm going to jump in.
Yeah, you do.
Right there. Recently, the CBC was talking about how Obama was actually way worse for the press than Trump ever was in terms of freedom of information and suing press, and Trump just says bad things. Do you think the institutional blocking is worse than lying? Like, it's I was really surprised to hear that, and I didn't. How does that play out in Washington? I
think you can make that argument, and it's not crazy. I mean, Obama's administration went aggressively after whistleblowers and after reporters who used some of the information that was provided by them, and that was really troubling. And press freedom organizations and the White House Correspondents Association criticized Obama for it. To me, I think I'd argue that this broad effort to delegitimize the media and facts is it's subjective, but to me that's more troubling than Obama going after particular reporters who published, classified or sensitive information. I strongly oppose that also, but to me, like, this is an extremely destructive effort to get no one to believe anything other than what Trump says, and so I argue that is worse.
Great. Do you have a question here? And back there? Okay, great. Oh, two back there. Okay.
What is the biggest misconception about Donald Trump held by his supporters, and the biggest misconception about the man held by his critics?
Well, critics I think have a bunch. One of them you hear a lot is that he is like this strategic puppet master. You hear, I call it distraction theory. Like, he's only talking about the Kentucky Derby or whatever because he wants to take your eye off. This guy is testifying today. The Mueller something or other is coming out tomorrow. There's a damaging court ruling. And I think almost all the time it is far less strategic than that. He is just being who he is. He is distracted, and so he is conveying his distraction to us. And now we are distracted. But it's not like he is intentionally trying to distract us. I think his critics can also, they think they'll say that he's dumber than he is. Like, he has kind of this mad gut instinct for for especially what his base wants, but sometimes for the broader electorate. I think Rob Ford had an even greater genius at it than Trump does, but both of these men that I've covered just sort of intuitively understand what will play, what will help them. And so, yeah, I think he's in a lot of ways smarter than critics give him credit for. And his supporters, I really think it is it's the perception that he is a straight shooter when he is very much not.
Well, yeah.
Do you get a chance to speak with congressional Republicans and their aides off the record? And if so, how divergent is their view in private versus their view in public?
I've had almost no conversations with Republican elected officials. I speak to a lot of just Republican, aides, people, lobbyists, people in the Republican world. And they it's very divergent. So they know that he is frequently unhinged. Their lives are frequently sent into tailspins because, even for like lobbyists, they don't know if the commitments that he's made on a given policy are going to be carried out, or if it's just something he's saying to make them like him in the moment. He lies to them, he lies to his own aides. And so there are true believers, even that, educated elites who say he's brilliant, he's doing everything we could ask of a Republican president. I think he's awesome. And if you press them, you can get them to admit, well, he's a little eccentric. Well, yeah, he might not be truthful all the time. But I think that is the anomaly. For the most part, people are seeing him mostly as he is. Often the more common argument, I think, is, yeah, like he's sometimes, off his rocker. Yeah, I wish he didn't make so many things up, but he's carrying out the same agenda that Mike Pence or Marco Rubio or Jeb Bush would do. Look at the tax cut, look at the economy, look at the two justices on the bench. And so they make an argument about achievements rather than himself.
There was
sort of related, I guess, to that last one, but I'm just wondering, in your sources, the different people you talk to, some of the day-to-day mistruths, like the Boy Scouts, you can sort of slough off, but what if you talk to anyone, if a real crisis actually happened, sitting around a situation room, who does the real thinking and real talking? Or does he rise to the occasion or not? And what do you think would happen in a real important situation?
It's so hard to say. His supporters say he's handled things well. Like, he made the decision to strike, that early strike, like 59 missiles against Syria. People applaud that. We have a humanitarian crisis on the border that, Democrats and others say he's mishandling. His supporters say what he's doing is great. And so I don't know in practice how he would behave if there were a big terror attack. And, people like me have been warning this whole time, if there's a real crisis, like a terror attack where you really need to believe the information coming from the top, and you can't with Trump, how would that play out? It's really hard to say.
I wonder how Putin and Kim Jong-un,
yeah, I'd love to.
how other leaders deal with it, who have to sit down and talk to him.
Well, I know, talking to Trudeau's people, like I've had Trudeau's people be like, when I've tweeted about him being sort of unhinged at a rally, like they'll text me or something and be like, this is exactly what he's like in private.
When he took off after the last, was the G7 meeting or whatever,
right,
and just attacked Trudeau,
yeah,
and attacked the Canadian government, it was.
Yeah, so like what I've heard from Canadian sources is that he's not, like, he's smarter than you give him credit for. He knows, he knows what he's doing, but you cannot get factual information to him if he is convinced that he is right. And so, we had this fight with the trade deficit, with dairy. What we see with Trump is that he fixates on something, whether it's a lie, whether it's a policy position, and it's very hard to shake him.
Great, good. Yeah.
Hi. If I can, Daniel, ask you a personal question. So I'm tired watching the news. So I don't understand how you've sustained this level of effort for as long as you have. And I know I'm on Twitter a lot, and there was a lot of buzz yesterday about maybe you making a change. Mm-hmm. And so I'm just curious, without boxing you in, if you're one, if you can talk about what it feels like to be you, and two, what's your next big leap?
Yeah, so I did accept another job at another news outlet, and I can't say where I'm going yet, hopefully very soon. But I'll be at the Star for a little while longer at least, and yeah, I'll just say, like, it's been an amazing time at the Star. It's been 11 years somehow. I had a young person at the Star yesterday tell me that, like, they grew up reading me. I'm like, how old am I? But it's been, and the Star, and I'm not just saying this, to make anyone feel better that I'm leaving or something. Like, the Star has been amazing, and what I've done in terms of the fact checking, using the word lie, devoting this much time to fact checking one politician, it truly would not be possible at so many other news entities in Canada and especially in the U.S. Like, I've had a number of reporters be like, I can never, my boss would never let me do what you do. And so, the things that I get compliments for, it's been because the Star has let me do it, from editor Irene Gentle on down, and even encouraged me to do it, and always saw the value in it. In terms of, like, the toll it takes and all that, yeah, it's really tiring, and I never want to complain about it because in reality, journalists do a lot harder things than, like, sit in their pajamas and read transcripts, which is what I do. The thing that is a burden, the thing that I like least now, is maintaining the comprehensive list. So, when I do the real-time fact-checking during his rallies, it's kind of like a game, like, how fast can I point something out? When I sort of do a lot of research on a particular false claim and can bring to light, to the American public, to American journalists, like, this is a serious false claim or lie, here's why it's wrong. It feels good, like, kind of like getting a scoop. You've dug something up. But when, there are weeks when there's like 150 false claims, and some of them it's like, no one is going to care about this except for the purpose of maintaining the comprehensive tally. There are days when I sit there, and it's really nice in Washington a lot of the time. It's like a beautiful spring day, and the birds are literally chirping, and I'm, like, looking at the window being like, I have like 5 more hours of transcripts, and there are times where I really don't like it. But it's easy to keep going because, one, it's difficult to feel useful as a Canadian correspondent in Washington, and so I found a way to feel like I'm contributing to the discourse in some way, and that keeps you motivated. And then also, like, people are so nice to me, right? Like, people are here hearing me speak. People send me so many nice emails. I've gotten, like, actual letters just from people in, like, Ohio and California being like, thank you, keep me hopeful and sane. And so there's so much nice validation that it's easy just to continue.
And you think you will continue?
Yeah, I will continue.
One more question.
That's sort of to my point. I was going to say, wherever you go, I certainly hope it's somewhere that gets you a wider audience, because I think the work that you're doing is very important.
Thank you.
In a time when the future of truth is pretty uncertain in politics. On that point, we laugh about the things that we hear, the lies that are told. Do you think it's being taken seriously enough from the perspective of, is it just beyond being untruthful? Is there a mental illness issue? There's a lot of things in the media, even expert analysis that's suggesting that some of his behaviors are indicative of something much deeper, making, it's not a lie to say that your father's born in Germany, that you can't actually remember, and sort of come up with that. So do you think that's being taken seriously enough?
It's hard to say. I mean, I had similar thoughts during the campaign, and I think the first mainstream story I saw on the subject, I think our headline was, "Is Donald Trump okay?" And I quoted various mental health professionals, and I also quoted disability rights activists who objected to the whole premise of, diagnosing someone from afar and asserting that someone may have a mental illness when this person's argument was like, he's just a bad person, so from our perspective in, like, the mental health advocacy community, don't put him on us, which is interesting. But so I wrote that story, and I think it's a very valid topic of discussion. I think the challenge in continually writing about it is factually we don't know. We can't, even if you don't have ethical qualms about diagnosing someone, like, we don't know if he has mental health issues. And so I don't think it's an unfair, inappropriate question. I think it's just very hard as a subject to approach, and especially to continually approach. Like once you ask the question, once you put it out there, it's hard to think of how to keep doing it.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So anyway, and thank you for your question. Congratulations on your great work, and you have had a great run at the Star.
Thanks, Val.
They've been lucky to have you, and you them, and we'll stay tuned for what happens next. But I assume it's awesome and it's exciting to do something different.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
On behalf of the Canadian Club of Toronto, I really want to thank you both for the really rich discussion. It was sort of hard to know as you spoke whether the appropriate response was to sort of laugh or cry that we find ourselves in this situation. There may also be sort of a learning opportunity here. Just want to say this is, we have 10,000 people outside watching this on the screen, and I think it's 200,000 people watching this by video. So I'm glad you could come to the largest Canadian Club event ever. That's what someone told me. I heard it. So, all joking aside, though, this is a topic of super serious importance, and thank you for all the work you do, Daniel. Back in Washington, and we're looking forward to seeing what you do next. Presumably, not joining the president, the White House communications team. No. But we look forward to seeing what you do next, and thank you for all the work you do and for being here today. And Valerie, of course, thanks to you for moderating really a really fascinating conversation and for all the thoughtful questions and comments you made as well. We're really thrilled that you were part of this event. Just before we close, I'd like to tell you about a few upcoming events we have. On May 10th, we have a leading panel of experts who will be speaking about Canada's medical cannabis industry. If that's something of interest, we have that event going on. It's going to be great, I think. And on May 15th, we will discuss the need for mental health solutions. There's quite a lot of focus on mental health, and which I think is absolutely appropriate, and we'll be having a great group of leaders in the field discuss that. We also just announced this morning that we'll be recognizing former Prime Minister Mulroney at an event in early June. If anyone's interested in that, that'll be downtown as well. We hope you can all attend. I want to thank MediaEvents.ca, Canada's online event space, VVC for live streaming today's event, and also Ryerson DMZ for hosting us. Thank you very much. This has been great. We love coming here. And finally, thanks to all of you for joining us. Have a great day.